Hello class, this is Dr. Schwab here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the analyzing scores analysis that you guys are working on and give some tips that I think might help. First thing I want to mention is a little word of caution. I know I got an email where someone told me that the school psychologist does all the interpretation, gives the tests and all that, which is true. And when I was at Western Kentucky, we had someone from school counseling and psychology come in, school psychologist, to talk to my students. And they mentioned something really important, and that is they're the ones trained to explain the test scores to parents. You guys aren't trained to do that. However, what I do want you to be able to do is be able to understand the scores so you can ask questions. If something is not correct and doesn't look right, you need to be able to go to school psychologists and say, what's going on here? This doesn't make sense. You say it in a nice way, but you do want to know, you want to be able to ask those questions from time to time. So, I'm going to start out by showing you a little bit of the bell curve, and I do want to apologize for my bad drawing. I'm a special education teacher. I'm a math person mainly. I'm not a drawer. I'm not an artiste. Okay, so as was explained on the slide, you've got a normal bell curve here, which means some scores are going to fall below, some are going to fall in the middle, the majority fall in the middle, and some will fall above. So I'm going to draw a line here, and for any norm reference test, your mean is going to be 100, which if you look at the test scores here, same thing. And your standard deviation is going to be 15. I'm going to put that down here for now. I'm going to try to. So my standard deviation is 15. My mean is 100. This means some will fall above 100, some will fall below 100. And the standard deviation is the distance from the mean for each score. So now, let's say we are one standard deviation below the mean. So one standard deviation is 15 points. So that's 100 minus 15, which is 85. So any score between 85 and 100, any score between there is less than one standard deviation until you get to 85. Now, let's look at two standard deviations. So that's 15 away from 85, so that would be 70 here. So, because 85 minus 70 is 15. Now notice that. That's two standard deviations from 70, or 30. So one standard deviation is 15 away. Two standard deviations equals 30. So this is usually on a Woodcock-Johnson, this is the average IQ test. The average IQ is 100. After we've done RTI to determine if evidence-based interventions will help the student make progress, then we do the testing to see if they have a disability of some sort. And if they score around here, below two standard deviations in a certain area, then it might be, it's different than the IQ. So that's the important thing right there. That's how we determine a learning disability in a certain area. Let's say my math score is here, but my reading is up here. Then there's a discrepancy right here. Okay. Now, so, and then we can go to the other end as well. If I go up here, and we're doing 1 standard deviation, now we're adding, so this would be 115. And then 2 standard deviations. Would be 130. So now we're either 30 points or 2 standard deviations away from the mean. This is how we identify our gifted students. Gifted students are going to fall in this kind of range. So if it's between 100 and 115, it's less than 1 standard deviation. So let's say I have a score of 118. Then I would say that 118 is 1 to 2 standard deviations. So we're just learning to talk in terms of how close we are to the mean. And let's see what I can do here. I want to clear this out if I need to, but it's the same thing as if this was for the other test. In this case, best way to do this would be to, can I clear the whole thing? No, let's reopen it. Okay, so now so now let's look at this test here. You look at this here, the scores here, that's based on the norm referenced. Then if we look up here, the scaled scores are based on a mean of 10, a standard deviation 3. Therefore, 10, 7, 4, 1. You're subtracting 3 each time, or adding 3, depending on where the score is. So now, let's look at the questions here. The overall performance is stated on there for you. That's just reading the test. What is the distance of standard deviations? Well, subtract them. And then see how many standard deviations it is. Same thing for 3 up here. Now on 3 and 4, I suggest making a table. So here's what a table might look like from before. I create my table. I create my mean and standard deviation. And this is easy reference here. I put the score. How far away is it from the mean? And then how many standard deviations is it? Is it less than 1? Is it 1 to 2? Is it exactly 1? Is it more than 2? If it's more than 2, that usually indicates a major deficit. So now let's keep going. Develop a graphic profile of this information here. So this is another way we look at scores sometimes. So I wanted you guys to practice this. So where did the full scale score fall? Was it exactly on the mean? In which case I might put an X here. Was it 1 standard deviation? Was it between 1 and 2? In which case I might put an X here. Same thing for verbal. Where was it? For each one. Then, question 6. These are all the tests we're looking at here. And you've been given a scale here. If it's more than 2 standard deviations above the mean, then you're going to put significantly above average for any scores for that. If it is 1 to 2 standard deviations, then you're going to put that down here. So it all depends on how many standard deviations it is. This is the visual here, and then this is how you're going to categorize them. So when you hear a school psychologist say, yeah, they were slightly above average, then that usually means their score in this area, their score in this area was about 1 to 2 standard deviations above the mean. Then if they say they were significantly above average, they were 2 standard deviations above the mean. Now let's look at part 2. What scores are significantly different than each other? So I'm not going to use the actual test scores, but here's our scale right here. So we're looking for ones that are significantly different from each other. So that means they have to be 1 to 2 standard deviations apart from each other. So that means 1 standard deviation is 15. Another standard deviation is 30. So they've got to be in this range. So look at the scores on those tests and find ones that are between 15 and 30 for each one. And I'm going to let you do 8 on your own, but it says more significantly different from each other. So what score does it have to be? And then there is a pattern in these results. So summarize your results in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So you want to go back to your tests and look and see. Here she did, how did she do in comprehension? Is there another comprehension subtest over here where she scored similar? How'd she do in arithmetic? Is there a similar score there in terms of standard deviations? So you want to look and see how she did on each one. So guys, I hope that answers some questions on this. You're free to email me if you have more questions, but I think this should help clear some things up. Anyways, I will see you guys soon, and thanks a lot, guys.